Hey guys, welcome back to today's video. Today is Wednesday, July 16th, 2025, and today we are going to be talking about the Texas redraw in the state of California as Governor Gavin Newsom floats the possibility of retaliation against the Republican Party and the White House as they float and go directly to GOP state lawmakers in the Lone Star State and ask for 5 additional seats in the 2026 midterm elections. Now, for a bit of context, in the last presidential election, there were coinciding House elections that resulted in the Republican Party having a majority of 220 seats, Democrats being at 215. And Texas and California are prime states that show great examples of how partisan composition can make these states overwhelmingly in favor of the political party that wins them on the presidential level. Now, Texas and California are a bit different in that regard. California that voted for Kamala Harris by 20 points, whereas Texas voted for Donald Trump by 14 points. Texas is a little bit less Republican than California is Democrat. And that makes sense, right? Higher proportions of the presidential popular vote going to the Democratic Party in California would make sense that it has more Democratic seats across the state. But Donald Trump's whole thing here is that in this obsession around the 2026 midterm elections, he is fearful that a House majority this narrow would easily collapse in the next midterm election cycle. In 2016, Donald Trump saw that he was able to usher in, alongside his victory, Republicans being at 241 seats in the House of Representatives. It actually was about 6 seats gained on the Democratic side from 2014 when Democrats were at 188. So in 2016, when Democrats were able to be at 194, they knew it would be an uphill battle at winning back the governing majority in 2018, but they did it anyways. In 2018, Donald Trump and the Republican Party lost 40 seats across the country, and Democrats ended up with 235 seats across the board. Democrats flipped numerous districts that had voted for Donald Trump, including ones that voted for Hillary Clinton but had Republican incumbents, and it overall was a great year for the Democratic Party. But in 2026, Donald Trump is trying to do everything he can to mitigate these losses. We've talked about it in previous videos. And while I don't want to spend too much time talking about this effort that Donald Trump has, specifically to Texas, we'll actually do that in a later video today, looking at some possibilities, potential ideas for what a map might look like if Donald Trump was to get his way. The Texas redraw is an effort to take 5 seats away from the Democratic Party that doesn't even make it 25 to 13, but instead would give Republicans 30 and Democrats 8. Now, looking at California, this is where Gavin Newsom comes in. Republicans hold 9 seats in the state of California. Democrats hold 43 seats. Now, this isn't necessarily because of just gerrymandering. Yes, this map is not the fairest to Republicans, but it certainly is not gerrymandered to the same extent that Texas is. And I can show you. If you were to add, let's say, 10 points or 5 points in favor of the GOP, their margin here goes up relative to what they would have gotten across the state in terms of vote share. About 15 seats up from 9. And then you shift it by 5 more points, you get to 16, then you shift it by 5 more, and then you get to about 20. So about a 15-point shift would result in Republicans gaining significant ground in the state of California, about 11 seats across the state. While it doesn't seem like a lot, it still gives the Republican Party right up there towards the popular vote. They don't exactly get the popular vote, but what it does here is it shows, yes, the map is not the fairest to the Republican Party, but what it does specific to California is that it gives Republicans a fighting chance that in a wave year, they could actually do quite well. In the state of Texas, it's not the same thing. If we actually take a look at what the map tells us in Texas for 2024 and we shift it the same exact way, just this time towards the Democrats, let's shift it by 15 points, exactly what we did in California. Democrats would go from 13 to 14. So, when you think about a gerrymandered map, you find that Texas actually is one of the most effective Republican gerrymanders in the country. Even a 15-point swing to the left would only gain Democrats 1 seat and by a margin of less than 1 percentage point. So thinking broadly about California, in many ways, California is a much more fair map. But with Donald Trump's consideration of trying to take those 5 seats from Democrats, Gavin Newsom, largely in an effort to do what many Democrats are hoping their elected officials do, not necessarily get shot for the anti-Trump resistance, but absolutely stand up and fight back. Don't go quietly into the night. Don't allow this majority to be a tyrannical one. That is the way that Democrats across this country view the Democrat versus Republican battle in Washington, D.C. And so what Gavin Newsom is doing is playing to his base to the highest degree. telling Texas and Donald Trump, if you redraw Texas, two can play at that game. His official account in an official statement, you will find that Gavin Newsom is toying with the idea of a redraw, saying and reminding Donald Trump that there are 9 Republicans in the state of California. Now, these 9 Republicans, in many ways, are vulnerable. Similar to how we just shifted the map in favor of the Republicans, let's say Democrats gain about 5 points across the state. Well, then Republicans go down to 8, shifted another 5, Republicans go down to 7, and then another 5 puts Democrats at 47 seats, Republicans at 5. So yeah, a 15-point shift would be overwhelming towards the Democratic Party, but is that really that shocking in a state Kamala Harris already won by 20 points? In this hypothetical, Democrats would be winning it by 35. But Gavin Newsom doesn't seem to be letting up from what Donald Trump wants to do in Texas. He might even draw a map here that is so favorable towards the Democratic Party if he's able to do so. He's floating an idea of doing a special election, going to the voters and saying, repeal the independent commission. There's also a possibility that you could have the state legislature amend the Constitution. Democrats hold governing supermajorities in both chambers in the state of California. You would find that effectively, Democrats could find a way around this map here. And I'm not saying they will. I think it's a lot less likely than it is likely. And I do think that Texas will probably ultimately get their way. And Democrats probably won't be able to redraw California this election, but potentially the next. Retaliation may take some time because California has much more significant legal framework than Texas does around redrawing. Texas can just do it whenever they want. And this is sort of the thing here that I think a lot of Democrats have often felt unseen about, is that Democrats all the time very much unilaterally disarm. When it comes down to gerrymandering, and you can see this, I mean, I've been covering elections since 2017, and I've seen it. I've gone through one census redraw, and you can find it to be very true. Even in 2010, you'll find it across the board. Democrats and Republicans historically have gerrymandered. But as of late, there have been national efforts to redraw maps to say it's not fair to gerrymander. Think about the provision that was in that Senate bill when Democrats had the majority in the Senate, House, and the presidency in 2021. In the John Lewis Voting Rights Act, the voting rights bill, what did they ask for? What did Democrats want? A national ban on gerrymandering. Couldn't pass. You had Sinema and Manchin who were holding out and wouldn't get rid of the filibuster to pass the bill. But think about this for a moment. What happened here? The national gerrymandering bill never passed, but it was only Democrats who voted for it. Even a carve-out, Republicans would have voted against it. Why? Because Democrats, for many cases, not just California, but states like Michigan and states like Colorado, put up votes to say, let's redraw our maps fairly, and then the red states will follow suit. If the largest state in the nation draws their maps through an independent commission, then certainly everyone else will follow suit. But very clearly, evidently, that wasn't the case. And I think we will see that towards the end of the decade, a lot of people are going to be saying, I don't want an independent commission anymore. And a lot of it's going to be rooted in the fact that they feel taken advantage of by the Republican Party. But Gavin Newsom doesn't seem to be letting that go easily. California is not the only state that could float a mid-district redraw. New York has the idea, but a lot of the Democrats there have said to the press that there's no appetite for it. But that's the same type of inaction that a lot of national Democrats and Democrats across the board are fed up with. They look at states like Illinois, a state that, yes, is unequivocally gerrymandering, and while I do think gerrymandering ultimately is bad for, democracy in general, you can see that it very clearly was intentional the way Democrats did things here. Take a look at these drawn maps. I mean, it is insane to think about. 2 of these districts went uncontested because Democrats knew they wouldn't be able to win them simply because Democrats drew them so they wouldn't be able to win them. They took a map that after 2018, even in a year so beneficial to the Democratic Party, Republicans still had 5 seats. Democrats had 13. In 2014, Republicans had 8. And then the Democrats took control after 2020 and said, never again. In 2022, a very good year for Republicans, or not very good year, but an okay year for Republicans, down to 3 seats. From 5, when they lost the election, this time they won the popular vote, down to 5. 2024, won the national map, down to 3 as well. So think about this, right? Think about the reduction in seats. Illinois is a great example for Democrats if they're looking for a gerrymandered state. New Mexico as well, great example. Comes down to California. To a degree, yes, but Gavin Newsom wants to go for more. And so I think speaking to this general point here of that Gavin Newsom and many other Democrats are just simply not doing the Republican BS that they have seen for far too long. Gavin Newsom is arguing to his constituents, likely soon, that they need to redraw the map because it's not fair for Republicans to draw maps elsewhere to disenfranchise voters in California. If there's a blue wave across the country and the losses are mitigated or even not a blue wave despite a national win in the popular vote because of maps like Texas being redrawn, people will look back at states like New York and, yes, California and ask, why didn't you do more? Donald Trump is openly telling the press, I want 5 more seats in redistricting. The follow-up question that the press asked in response to the 5 more seats, well, what if California does the same? Donald Trump calls them corrupt. And while that may be the Republican talking point, that it's fair to draw in a red state and unfair to draw in a blue state, if Democrats abide by that talking point, they are playing right into the hands of all the people who said that Democrats are ineffective. Democrats look at this, and they look at the way that their voters are trying to get out the old guard. You can find it in election after election that there is this appetite, not necessarily just for young blood, but for a more left-wing resistance. I think a lot of Democrats looking after the 2016 election felt like that Democrats at large weren't doing enough. That Donald Trump was being allowed to walk all over a national party that shares political power with the incumbent party. And they look at Democrats at the times where they have their own presidency. They see the fact that they were nerfed by the United States Supreme Court. That Manchin and Sinema were the reason why the filibuster didn't get abolished, and you couldn't pass D.C. statehood, and you couldn't pass the voting rights bill. All of these different things, right? And I think when they see something like this from Newsom, it actually does satisfy an appetite for many Democrats. I mean, if you're a Democrat watching this video, let me know how you feel about this in the comment section down below. But to be fair, I think if Newsom, after being elected in 2018, had said the same thing in Trump won, the reaction would have been entirely different. But this time, I do adamantly believe Democrats are in fact looking for something more. They are in fact looking to a greater degree of Democratic pushback through the legal mechanisms that exist. Because I think a lot of Democrats came off that last presidential election feeling very hopeless, like there was no shot at pushing back. And Donald Trump isn't just doing this quietly. I mean, we know that redistricting can happen. Republicans actually have done it in Texas before, and that's the whole thing. In 2000, Republicans had just 13 seats in the state delegation, but they redrew the map. Democrats redrew the map. But instead, Republicans said, 2002 came along. Republicans win back control of the state legislature, but lose the congressional delegation. They say, we don't care, we're redrawing it because we have the authority to do so. And so they did. Democrats went from 17 down to 11. Republicans are no stranger to breaking the traditional norms to redraw their maps. And this isn't to say that Democrats don't either, but disproportionately, it has been Republicans. After the 2020 census, Republicans had the authority to redraw significantly more districts. They had 100 more districts to redraw than Democrats, and just take a look at the difference on the map here in terms of shades. A lot more safe red and a lot more safe blue. Texas is a great example of how Republicans used their redraw to prevent any types of losses. In the 2018 midterm elections, if you had just shifted the map by 5 points to the left, Democrats would have won the majority in the Texas delegation. They would have won the majority for the first time since 2002. That's the year I was born. 19-17. So they knew they had to redraw it. They made it impenetrable, and they did so successfully. 2018, 2020, and then safe red. The darkest of red you can see. Some districts even uncontested. So when you think about the way that Republicans and Democrats have operated on congressional redistricting, there is a noticeable difference across the board. And while there may be examples of Democratic gerrymandering, Illinois is a good one. You look back at states like North Carolina, where a fair map was drawn, a state that was won by Trump by 1 point, has equal representation of Democrats and Republicans. But then Republicans got control, they redrew the map, and this is it now, 10-4, with only one real opportunity, and it's a long shot, of winning a seat there. The rest, safe red. So Democrats looking at California, they might be finding something in Newsom's pushback that they might have never found before this second Trump administration. And it'll be interesting to see if California does redraw, because there could be significant electoral ramifications for the Republican Party if Democrats decide to do so. The question is, Do they do what Texas is very clearly going to do? Or do they sit back, stand by, and allow Republicans to walk all over them in a number of congressional races across Texas and potentially setting up the precedent that it can be done across the board in any other red state that would like to follow suit? So thank you guys so much for watching this video. Make sure to comment down suggestions below. Subscribe on the left if you haven't already, and check out the Instagram and Twitter. At the top left of the screen, there's also a Discord server for you to go ahead and join. On the screen, there's a video for you to watch, and then a playlist for my 2026 House election analysis videos. Again, thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you all later today.